Welcome to Around the Fencepost, where grit meets growth, stories spark change, and real conversations build stronger farms and futures.
Welcome back to Around the Fencepost. This is your host, Jacob Leach. With us today, we've got Dr. Bruno Pedreira from the University of Tennessee. He's an extension forage specialist, serving producers across the state. His work focuses on forage systems, grazing management, hay quality, fertility, and long-term planning. He's known for taking university research and turning it into practical, real-world decisions producers can use immediately. I've got had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Bruno at the Tennessee Forage and Grassland Council meeting we had down here in Jackson in March, and have enjoyed the conversation that night, and have looked forward to having him on for a time, and I'm really glad we were able to connect on this. So, Dr. Bruno, welcome, and tell us the Dr. Bruno story.
Thank you so much, Jacob. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here in the around the Fencepost to talk a little bit with you guys.
How long have you been? And I guess if you don't mind, give us some of your background. How you wound up in the role you're currently in. And then we'll get into it.
No, excellent. I'll be glad to do so. I'm a farmer myself, born and raised in a livestock farmer down there in Brazil. You know, by the accent at this point, you already realize I'm not from here, right? As I like to joke, I'm from the south, from the very south. I crossed the world and a half to be here, and I'm the fifth generation myself, left behind. My dad is still running the operation down there. And I decided to go, to study a little bit more. My main challenge with he and my grandpa was that I always thought that they were very focused on the animal side of the livestock operation. And my understanding is that the livestock operation has at least 3 steps, right? 1 is soil, 2 is forage, 3 is livestock. So I cannot be only focused on the 3rd step of my whole operation if I don't consider forages and soils before that. So I decided to study, left home, went 2 states south, got my bachelor's, all of my degrees, found my first job in Brazil still, worked there for almost 11 years in what we call Embrapa, which is like the ARS we have in the US, the research side of the USDA. So I was a researcher down there for a little over a decade. And then I got an offer from Kansas State University, moved to Kansas, working in the Great Plains for almost 3 years. When Dr. Gary Bates, that you all know about it, he was the forage specialist for over 30 years in Tennessee, became department head, and he was looking for someone to replace himself. That's when I got a call in Kansas, and they said, well, we want you to come to Tennessee and check it out, see if you can work for us. And I came, and here I am in Tennessee as, happy as ever for 3 years now. Yeah, I'm roughly making my 3rd year now, and very, very happy to be in that transition zone. I think Tennessee is a great place to be. It's a great challenge in terms of livestock production, right? We can have warm season plants, we can have cool season plants. We can poorly grow both of them. We'll have years where Fescue is going to do good. We have years that Fescue is going to be terrible, and then crabgrass will do good, and Bermuda will do good. So it's a great forage challenge. And be able to work here has been a blast. I'm very, very happy to be here.
Yeah, that's you called it. This state has the weirdest ups and downs, and we were just talking before we came on air about the different challenges that we see because of the soil types across the state, because of the elevation differences. We just have to have the whole enchilada when it comes down to it. I bet sometimes you miss those flat states for just the plain boringness of it, huh?
Yeah. No, Kansas was great, but I really like the hills of Tennessee. And as you mentioned, it's really interesting because soil change, right? If I drive here from Knoxville to Memphis, I may pass by 30 different soil types. And sometimes a producer call me, and I'm always asking them, did you get rain in the last 2 or 3 weeks? Because sometimes we're pouring down in rain here in Knoxville, but someone is, in the plateau and they didn't get any. So it's always important to me when I am over the phone with someone to try to understand what is the scenario there, because sometimes an hour from here, the drought is different than what we have right now. Today we are in drought in the whole state. I think some places we got up to 3 inches in the last few days. It's getting better, but yeah, that variability that we have in Tennessee is something that fascinates me.
Yeah, that's a really accurate point. And I talked to a young gentleman down here in Brownsville area, and he was talking just the other day about it raining south of him and raining west of him, and just he's getting spot showers, and we've had that definitely where we live here close to Paris in years past. But it's it keeps it interesting. It keeps some stuff challenging. Before we get into the drought side, because I do have that on my list today kind of things to watch for, and you did a great job on your livestock episode that dropped today, guys, if it's on Spotify. But that's one they talk at length about different things that are important as far as being able to manage your pastures around too much with the drought, and whether you're taking too much crop off and need to leave more residue to support the root system. But before we get into that, let's talk about, and you did your presentation at the Tennessee Forage and Grassland Council on this, and I really was enjoying that topic. It's something I'm passionate about, but soil fertility and the importance of pasture fertility and hay ground fertility, because I think a lot of the times as and maybe I'm generalizing too much with this, but it seems a lot of times in ag we think a lot about how we're going to fertilize our row crop ground or fertilize even our annuals, but hey, we're not that worried about that perennial pasture or perennial hay ground. That's just there, and it's what it is. So I'd like to let you tell us about that a little bit, and I'd like to ask a couple questions on it, because it's a great topic.
It is, and I'm all about soil fertility, because as I start mentioning to you, soil to me is the base of the system, right? If I do not know what I have in the soil, if I don't understand what is my ground, how can I grow green grass and feed my livestock? Right? That's the question that comes to me. And if you don't understand that, if you don't take that in consideration, we'll be here discussing what is the best supplement or how many hay bales I need to make through the winter, and I do not know exactly, what I'm able to produce. And for example, I got a phone call this week from a farmer that told me, Bruno, I want to challenge you to grow forage in Tennessee for 12 months. I don't want to feed hay. Can we do this? So soil fertility to me is the very beginning of this whole conversation. Can we push our growing season to be longer than what it is? Can we reduce the amount of hay we have been feeding animals during the winter? Well, the last hay survey we put together at the University of Tennessee, we found out that on average we feed hay in Tennessee for 143 days. And then we start to discuss, what can we do to feed less hay? And again, soil is the very beginning of that conversation. If I can produce more forage, if I can produce forage for longer, and if I can combine those forages throughout the year in different pastures or in mixture pastures, we probably going to be able to stretch that season a little bit, right? So getting back to your point, when you mentioned perennial forages and hay fields and grazing, the first point I want to make on this, Jacob, is we need to separate what is hayfield and what is pasture ground, right? On the pasture side of it, 85% of what a cow will eat will come back through the backside, right? The cycling is there. We are feeding those animals there, it goes through the rumen and they will poop and pee everywhere. So it's a lot of what is used there is coming back. The hard time of that is if you don't have a good rotational grazing, most likely all of this pee and poop will be deposited in a single corner of the pasture. If we can split it and and the animals are more spread across, we're going to split it better. We're going to distribute it better. On the other hand, in hay fields, we are basically removing everything above 3 or 4 inches, right? We go there, we harvest, we bale, and we send it out. So what we realize from the data I have here in the lab, because the University of Tennessee has a forage lab and we do run hay test every year and forage analysis overall, and that's the time of the year that a lot of these start to come in. We kind of back calculate based on the samples we receive here from producers. And what we found out was that every time you harvest a single acre of hay, right, and assuming that you have a fescue hay field that you are going to produce 2.5 tons per acre every year, what we learned is that you are removing 90 pounds of nitrogen, 90, 24 pounds of phosphorus, and 105 pounds of potassium. So 90, 24, 105 is the removal rate of N, P, and K in a hay field every year. So how can I, how can I just think that, nothing's happening there, right? The removal rates are really, really high. And that's the reason I've been telling producers that regardless of your hay production or regardless of your environmental conditions, we need to take soil samples and figure out what you have in the soil and what you don't have in the soil, so we can come up with a plan to help you to keep those plants there as perennials, as you start your question to me.
What do you and we know nitrogen is getting away from soil, it's leaching, it's going down. What is it? Potassium, same type where you go through a bit of it. So as far as putting your even applying fertilizer, being able to keep that intact with your root systems and all those other things being important. Obviously we have an advantage on our perennial grass compared to as far as having that to increase that cation exchange capacity. But with that, because you're looking at perennial grasses with what we're talking about, what's the biggest issue on Tennessee fertility on this type of hay and pasture ground right now that you're noticing?
Well, from what I have been receiving here, and again, we also have the soil plant and pest center in Nashville, so I have access to the whole data set on the soil in the state, and we just put a really nice report. Is at the website where you can see all the pH, P and K by county based on the soil tests we received. On the forage side of it, on when we are talking about grass pastures, pH is my first big problem. Most of my soil pH in most of the pastures I've been working with, and most of the soil test reports I've been be able to go through, pH is always low. And pH will tell me about the chemical environment in the soil. So if your pH is around 5, and most of the soil samples, again, it's 5.2, 5.3, sometimes in the upper 4s, but most of them in the low 5s. It tells me that I need to do something. And do something means bring lime into this. So that will be my first step. I want to know what's the soil pH in that soil so I can correct the chemical environment there to make sure that nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, they are all available to the plants. Because what we know is if your pH is too low, even if you have phosphorus in that soil, that phosphorus will not be available to the plants because they are so close to the soil particles, so tied to the soil particles that those plants will not be able to uptake that one. So as you increase the soil pH, you kind of lose up the nutrients, and they will be plant available, and they weren't before. So they will show up in your soil test as it is there, but if soil pH is low, it's there, but the plants cannot use it. So pH is the first thing you're going to spend money on, right? And lime is not that expensive. Egg lime is available. We have a few places across Tennessee that you can find lime. Sometimes it's not just in your fence, but it is in a couple miles of distance. It'll be around. If my pH is okay and I correct pH with using lime, my next two steps are going to be phosphorus and potassium. And as you mentioned, nitrogen is something that's very mobile in the soil that can run off your property very easily, but P and K are not. So P and K will be in the soil. If you apply P and K, they will stay there. Even if you are in a drought year like this year, if you apply P and K, they're not going anywhere. It's going to be there, right? Nitrogen is different. Nitrogen is very mobile. So we want to apply nitrogen when plants are really growing, when they're greening up, or when you're harvesting, grazing them, and you know that you need that nitrogen there. It needs to be applied when the plants are in need of. So soil test will tell me what is my pH, what's my P and K. And based on that, we will create a plan. And remember, I think one of the things that I like to mention when we are talking about this is it's not just about what I don't have in the soil. It is about what I don't have in the soil and what are my goals. It is my goal to produce 2 tons to the acre, or is my goal to produce 3.5 tons to the acre, 4 tons to the acre? Am I going to harvest that fascule twice, or I'm going to harvest that fascule 3 times? Or how are you managing that? I have producers that they just harvest hay in the spring and then they graze in the fall. I have producers that they have hay fields and they will, if they can take 3 cuts, they will do 3 cuts. And the goals are different. If you have, more equipment available, if you are working in bigger areas and you want to have more hay, you got to push it. If you don't have that budget, Bruno, I'm okay with 2 tons to the acre. I just have a few cows here. I want to just feed them and keep them well fed. We don't need to push nitrogen that much, right? So I'm going to push nitrogen as much as high as your goal. I think that's my goal.
That's a great call out. Match the need of your farm, and I've got producers that I sell seed to, and they'll talk to me on what they should be doing fertility wise. And this one has like 200 bales of hay for 20 mama cows, and I'm like, well, why? What are we doing here? I
like to mention that because sometimes I see soil test reports that and it follows on the soil test report as well. Sometimes you see there, the goal is 4 tons to the acre. Man, I know very few producers in Tennessee that will produce 4 tons to the acre in a fascule hay field, right? Most of us, including myself in my trials in Tennessee, I'm harvest 2.5. If you don't go to 4, there is no reason to you to spend, I can throw a number here, 200 pounds of nitrogen, 250 pounds of nitrogen. So you can be in the lower side of it and be more in between 60 and 120, 150, a little bit after each harvest, depending on the weather. In a year like this, if there is no rain in the forecast, I'm not going to spend it with money with nitrogen because I know that I need water so that plant can get that nitrogen. It's going to grow after all. So what's the weather? Did you get rain or not? Is there any rain in the forecast or not? I'm not going to apply nitrogen if it's 85 Fahrenheit outside and there is no rainfall in the forecast.
And watch it go up into the atmosphere.
Yeah, exactly. Volatilization, that's the name of the process, right? When urea hits the ground and there is no moisture there, everything goes up. Nothing goes to the soil.
Oh, there he is. Sorry.
There he is.
That went sideways on me. Okay. Yeah, that's a big part of it. Needing to keep this in hand, especially as we see nitrogen prices get higher and higher. We need to make all these be as efficient in the way they work as possible. And you mentioned pH, and you had a great social media post on this not real long ago because I find it. I don't want to say I find it funny because it's not funny when people waste money, but liquid calcium is not a pH fixer. It is a foliar nutrient to put on to increase the calcium uptake of your plant. and
You nail it.
that has to be said. And you've done, and you can expound on this, but that's something you made a post, and I know I shared it because that's over here like one of those things that I want to shout from the rooftops. It's an easy thing for people to have for an add-on sale, and I think there's benefits to having calcium. I have people that swear by the idea that they put a heavier bone on their calves because they feed a lot of calcium products through their soil. And that's very possible, but they're saying they have a more nutrient dense forage. But what they're not saying is that their pH is better.
Well, I think each and every product has its place, right? I think the thing with those liquid lime or liquid calcium, as you mentioned, they are calcium fertilizers, and they are really good for, if you're growing strawberry, tomatoes, things like that has fruits. Though it's really good. You need to have a good fruit. If you're gonna have a good tomato, a good strawberry, you need to have a lot of calcium on that thing. What bothers me is that we do have data and science behind the data, right? I think as an employee of the state of Tennessee, as someone that speaks on behalf of the Institute of Agriculture of the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, we need to use data to tell our producers what to do without any kind of bias. So I'm really glad that I don't sell anything. I don't live off of it. I can tell you whatever I think, and that's what makes my life, what it is. So we went through data, and University of Kentucky here, right up north, and Mississippi State University just south of us, they both put really great trials in several farms. The University of Kentucky worked with 16 different farmers across the border here, just across the border of Tennessee. And they applied those products side by side with egg lime and pellet lime, which are those two good ones that we know that work. And they came back 3 months later, and 6 months later, and a year later, and they took soil samples on those same place, and there was no change in soil pH. So that's my issue with the product. Not that the product doesn't work. Yeah, the product does work in the plant and the plant nutrition. You may have a forage that has a little bit more calcium, and sometimes a little bit greener because the product has a little bit of nitrogen on it as well. But it does not change soil pH. And when we are talking about soil fertility, when we are talking about building soil health and soil fertility, I want to have my pH on that sweet spot that is in between 6 and 7, right? If I have a 5.3, man, I gotta bring that thing back to 6, and it's not gonna be using liquid lime that result is going to show up. Very interestingly, I got an email from a producer 2 months ago. It was early this spring, and he sent to me 2 soil tests. The one that he took after applying the product, and the other one that he took maybe 2 or 3 months after applying the product. And his pH was exactly the same, and he was kind of mad, and he wants me to help him to explain what's going on. I said, man, that's exactly the point. This product was not made to change soil pH. So please, if you have a low 5 pH, we got you to use egg lime or pellet lime. My issue with the pellet lime is the cost. That thing is good, but it is expensive. So if you have a small area, if we are working with horticultural areas, all of these crops that does not require a big chunk of land, pellet lime is great. For us, if I'm going to, using lime in a 40-acre pasture, in a 35-acre hayfield, it needs to be egg lime because it's going to cost you $40, $45, $50, per acre applied already. So there is no silver bullet yet. If it's too good, if you think that it is too good, probably because if it's too good to give you the result, right? So please think about it, and if there was something that good, we will be here recommending to y'all.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at that. Don't be shy about calling your extension agent or talk to somebody that doesn't sell the product. Sometimes it might help.
Please do so.
And I'm not knocking independent sales on that. I just know there's a lot of things promised sometimes that aren't necessarily what they're said to be.
Oh, Jacob, and that's our role here, right? As a land grant university, that we have been paid from you guys to do it. We are here to serve the people of Tennessee. We are here to test the new products. We do, for example, through the Beef and Forage Center here, we do a lot of variety trials. I have right now almost 500 plots across the state testing 80, 85 different forage genotypes. That's our role. We will test them before you guys. I don't want my producers to buy a cultivar, a variety that we never tested in Tennessee, take the risk himself. I need to do this. I need to pay the price, and we have research stations across the whole state to do that with us. So we can test those plants every year. We have in our website. If you go to the utbeef.com, you'll find all the variety trials are there. All the varieties that we tested in Tennessee, the ones that worked, the ones that did not. So before giving a try and spend your money, let me do it for you. That's my job, right? We will provide you with the good information. And as we test them, we learn about them. Sometimes we will find a disease that nobody ever seen before. Sometimes we will realize that they need probably much more nitrogen than others. And then we build that knowledge that we share with our extension agents that you just mentioned. That's another thing that I'm very proud of. That the University of Tennessee has an extension office in every single county of the state. We have 95 counties and we have 95 extension offices. Go talk with your extension agent. He will have access to all of this information because people like me, all of the extension specialists with the university, we provide what we call in-service training. So those agents come to us every year and we go to them every year and we get together, we get along and we share the news and they are up to speed every year. So use them, please. They are our front, they are the guys in the front. Please reach out.
100%. And, and then there's all the other resources. There's podcast, and I like to think mine is educational, but you've got Forage Nexus that you were a part of. I don't know if you guys are recording on that one anymore. And then your livestock one, some very good information for regional type of news. It's not like we are talking about, this information's good in Washington State. Nothing wrong with Washington State, but it's not the side of the country. So there's a lot out there that'll support that, support the knowledge that's available for the areas we are from. But the next thing I wanted to jump into was you had an article a couple of weeks ago talking about setting up for your 5-year rotation, or at least having an outline of a plan going into a 5-year either setting a perennial or rotating out your annuals. And I'd further that and ask, okay, what percent of your farm do you think you should keep in annuals and different things like that. But I'd like to hear more on this on the forage and field rotation idea.
Let's talk about this a little bit. And it was really interesting because an agent called me. We were talking about extension agents here, and the conversation would start with him. He called me and said, man, I have a farmer. He's a great producer, but he's not happy with what he's doing. And he attended one of your presentations. I need you to go there with me. I've been working with him for a while. He made a lot of progress, but we really need to fine tune that. And he really wants to think on the longer term. And that's something that I'm always talking about because I am the 5th generation myself, right? We haven't started yet, and I don't plan to be the last one. Someone will come after me. We already have there, the 6th generation is already ready there to take care of that thing in a few years. So when we are in livestock production, we are not here just for a single summer, right? We need to have that long-term thinking and plan that will help us to get to the next generation. That's my main concern right now. So I went to that farm visit and I found a guy that was hungry to talk about all of this. He received me in the front porch with a bunch of soil tests in his hand, a plot map of the whole farm with all the pastures already drawn in a piece of paper. And I spent a great day with him. We went through the farm. I checked on the pastures and I said, man, now I need 2 hours with you in your kitchen table. Can we do this? So we sat there for another hour and a half. And we went through what I call, 5 big steps. The first one is what we just talked about it here. what is your soil condition? You know, let's refine soil sampling and fertility management. I need to know what you have in the soil, and I need to know what you don't have in the soil, right? I think that's the catch here. That's what I'm looking for. Because if you have everything there and everything is fine, I'm okay. We don't need soil tests sooner, right? But if you don't have them, how can we plan in a way that you can pay for those bills, that those are probably the most expensive ones you need to pay every time you go to the co-op and ask for 200 pounds of urea or potash or DAP. Man, the bill is coming, right? If you have an 80-acre pasture, we know it's going to be a lot of money to pay for. So what can we do to know what you have, take your soil samples, and every two or 3 years to make sure that your baseline is good and everything is working well. And based on that, you can make the decisions on the soil side of it. My second step here would be, if you're growing forages, if you are taking your soil samples, if you have a good soil fertility program, you're going to be growing grass. And if you're growing grass, the next question is, are you grazing efficiently? How good is the job you were doing as a graze manager? How are you defining where the cows are going tomorrow or the day after that? Because that's when you fine tune and that's when you really bring back your money. So in that case, for example, he still had a few pastures that were like 60 acres, 80 acres. And he had, a few water sources. And man, what if we just cross fence this here, and divide that 80 in 3 pastures of 25, 30? And he was like, yes, I think I can do it. So my second step is, how can you split it a little bit and make sure that instead of be grazing a 60-acre paddock where you have no control of anything within that 60 acres, and the cows are making the call every day, and they will probably overgraze close to the minerals, they will overgraze close to the water, they will overgraze close to the gate, close to the house, close to the place they see you. And they will never go to the very back of that 60 acre to graze anything, because you don't want to go there to check even on the fence. Why do the cows are going there, right? So if you cross fence it, now the cows are not making the call. You are making the call, and you were telling them, grazing pasture 1 now and pasture number 2 tomorrow and pasture number 3, whatever is the day. So depending on the size of the herd, depending on the size, the acres of the paddocks, you can take more days or less days, and fewer days. One of the things that I like to also mention on this is, sometimes we see all of these maps, and I use some of them in my presentations. Everything is square and beautiful. There is nothing square and beautiful in nature, right? Everything is different. So you just need to draw the lines in your pasture to pull your cross fencing in the way it works for you, in the way it's going to be easier to you go through and move animals around. And sometimes you split like a 60-acre paddock like this, and you don't have 3 of 20. You have one that is 30, and the other 2 may be 12 and 18, because you don't have water, or you don't have shade, or you don't have something that you need. But what you know now is, when you were grazing that 30-acre pasture, it's going to take you more days than when you're grazing the 12 and the 18, right? And as you move them, now you know that you need to move them faster in the 12 than what you do in the 18, than what you do in the 30-acre paddock. So sometimes I feel like, Jacob, we don't move towards cross fencing because we have that, mindset. Oh, if I have a 40-acre paddock, I need to find a way to divide it in 8 or 5 or 5 of 8, and everything needs to be square and beautiful and move and have a central alley that animals are going through. No, forget about that. You've got to make your life easy. Don't make your life harder. Otherwise, you don't do it. And that's what I feel like we have not done more, because we are still waiting to do in the perfect way. And the perfect was going to kill you. Don't wait on the 100%. If you can keep yourself on the 85, from 75 to 85%, that's what I tell my students. I don't expect 100 out of you, man. If you can give me 3/4, I'll be pretty happy. And you move forward, go to the next task. It's the 80-20 rule, right? We got to move, got to find the next one. So take care of your soil. Find a way to put your cross fences so you can use better that forage that you are producing. My third step would be weed control. When you start to do this, you will feel like you are now harvesting better, you are using better your pastures, and because you are doing this, you're going to have a better cover, and your pasture will recover faster than they used to be, they used to do when you have a 80-acre paddock, a pasture. So when you have more divisions and you can move cattle around, we will rarely have bare ground. We will have much less chance that those weeds will pop up because plants are stressed, because plants are overgrazed. The best herbicide you can ever have is a stubble height, right? It's shade. If we are shading the ground, there is no reason to weeds to germinate and come into place. So make sure that you have that in mind so you can reduce the amount of weeds you have. You need to use herbicides anyway. Most of our pastures, you can, if you can spray at least once in a year, it will be helpful, especially because we know
I just got cut out again.
that's fine. I will keep going here and you edit later.
Okay.
Okay, especially if you know that you're going to, need to use some herbicide at some point. So you want to do it in the right way. You want to have your plan to control your weeds. And I like to mention that on the weeds because we have a lot of clovers in Tennessee. And I love the idea to have clovers. So if you're already working in your soil, having your cross fencing, and you were harvesting better in a way that you can keep your weeds off, it increases also your chance to have a good mixture pasture, right? To have clovers in the area. We have been recommending clovers in Tennessee for over maybe 50 years now. Gary was not the first one. Dr. Joe Burns before him was already doing this. So if I can keep 25-30% of that pasture with clovers, that'll be great. What a great combination, right? Fescue, worsted grass, and 25% clovers. Those clovers can bring to us from 50 to 60 units of nitrogen every year. We don't take that into consideration. We need to, right? But if I have a really hard herbicide program, how can I keep my clovers in place? So that's the other way around, right? If I want to keep my clovers, I will kill my weeds first, but I need to adjust my grazing management in a way that I will have a better soil cover. I'm not going to overgraze my pasture, so weeds cannot take place, and my clovers can be there because I don't need to use herbicide. So we need to start to think on the opposite way, so we can keep everything good and in place. I think those would be the three big steps that most of the farms I visited in Tennessee in the last 3 years could take some advantage of. Look better in their soils, look better in your, in your grazing distribution through improving grazing distribution through cross fencing, and have a clear target to weed control strategy. Know what you're doing to make sure that we will better use those pastures.
And those are great points. And I'd like to add one more to it because I just heard Katie Mason with you on Livestock say exactly this. And I recorded a video on this as well today because we were talking about pastures out here in May already starting to show some of that later summer stress.
Mm-hmm.
It is money ahead to put cows on feed, pull them in, and put your cross fence across. And whether you are interseeding a summer annual into something, whether it's just broadcasting some crabgrass or no-tilling some Sudex or something along those lines,
Mm-hmm.
you've got options. Put the cows on the hay now so that you don't hurt your perennial grass ground, because that opening, what you just said, opening up that bare ground allows for the weeds to come in, and then you just start losing your perennial grasses out of that, and it makes it it makes it hard to salvage it. At that point, then you're looking at having to invest the money again into replanting.
Yeah, and we are talking in replanting today with the fertilizer prices and seed prices. We are talking about $300, from $300 to $400, depending what you're going to do per acre, right? So it is better to spend some money on hay right now if you still have some, and do not stress out your plants even more. And that's the kind of conversation I've been having with Katie in the last few weeks, that's the time of the year we're going to talk about a sacrifice area, right? Move the animals to, a single corner of the farm that you can feed them better and you keep them there, instead of being stressing out all of them. And you mentioned the animals. With these 2 or 3 inches that we had, the last, 10, 15 days, we're probably going to be able to plant something. In some parts of the state, we do have some good rain in the forecast for the next 2 weeks. So if we can get that rain in, man, sudax, right, crabgrass, millet, you can play with some of these summer animals that can be very, very helpful. I mentioned earlier here today, Jacob, that we feed hay in Tennessee for 143 days, right? And we are in fescue country. Out of that 143 days, on that same survey, we found out that for 10 to 15 days of that 143 are during the summertime. Do you know why we're feeding hay in July? Because fescue is not producing anything else in July, right? I don't like to go to a farm visit in Tennessee in July, August, man. It's dry, it's hot, and sometimes there is nothing there to be grown. So why are we doing this, right? And let me make it clear, because every time I criticize fescue, I feel like people get mad with me. And that's not, I have nothing against fescue. I think fescue is a heck of a plant. But we got to understand that fescue is a cool season plant. And as a cool season plant, they don't like heat. That's not on me, and that's not on fescue. It's the nature of the process. So how can you have your system based in a single plant that that is a cool season plant? We got to explore. We have to explore more of the warm season plants in Tennessee. I know we lost most of our Bermuda to stem maggot and some of the bipolaris, the fungus. I understand it's being hard to keep Bermuda in Tennessee, but we do have the animals. Sorghum, sudax, crabgrass. Crabgrass is the kind of animal that responds like a perennial. If you plant crabgrass and you allow crabgrass to go for seed, it's gonna come back next year, baby. There is no way you can get rid of it. I like to think on the other way. If you ask me, Bruno, can I plant crabgrass this year? And I never want to see crabgrass in my farm again. I said, I'm sorry, we cannot do this because crabgrass is going to produce seed heads, and that thing's gonna come back next year. So it's a really bad weed for our row crop folks that may be listening to us as well. But for a livestock producer perspective, that's the best animal you can have, right? It's like annual ryegrass. If you had annual ryegrass once, it's gonna come back, baby. There is no way you're gonna get rid of that thing. So why don't you play a little bit with these animals that can help you, especially the warm season ones that will cover that gap that fescue cannot help us.
And you and Rocky were both talking about this down here in Jackson with the interseeding, whether you're no-tilling into your pastures or going or just leaving ground open. And I'm a big proponent of a 75 and 25%, and then every 4 years, if you need to change out a perennial, you can do that, which allows you to get kind of orchard grass heavy, because that's usually about the tail end of your orchard is that 4th or 5th year. But yeah, that's the what you can do with crabgrass and what people are doing. And you mentioned the annual ryegrass. I've got guys that run annual ryegrass through their Bermuda every winter and graze it in the spring for a few months before they go to starting to harvest their Bermuda. And I'm a big fan, and I think that really it's not taken advantage of enough with crabgrass through fescue to allow for some kind of a summer annual to keep. For one thing, it helps keep down weed pressure during the months that your season fescue is dormant, and for the other is you're continuing to get yield. Now, one of those pieces that I heard you mention earlier, or maybe your guest on the livestock podcast was talking about, that it does get a little hungry, and it does to some extent, but it's still cheaper to feed than Bermuda grass. That it's not nearly as needy as that stuff is.
Yeah. No, it is not. Yeah, I don't like to compare Bermuda with crabgrass, and some people, they don't like crabgrass because they feel like they're hungry as well. No, it is far from Bermuda, right? Bermuda is a fertilizer eater. They know how to handle that thing, and it can give you a really high yield. So what we need to understand is, and again, I will bring you back to your goal. What's your goal, right? What you really want at the end of the day, and how many acres you have of it. We're not asking you to switch from fescue to Bermuda or switch from fescue to crabgrass. What we are telling you is the producers that I've been seeing in Tennessee doing, the most with forage, doing the best in terms of production, are the ones that they, as you suggest, have from 70 to 80% of the property in cool season plants and 20 to 30% in warm season plants, and you balance that thing. You're gonna have that grow in June, July, and August that fescue will never give you, right? And if you have those warm season plants in a different pasture, you can come and overseed them with annual ryegrass, as you mentioned, or with wheat or cereal rye. As I mentioned to you earlier today, I worked in Kansas, and man, you can plant wheat late. So every time we have an issue and the fall is not good and they didn't plant what they want, they call me and said, man, if I'm gonna take a risk to plant a plant and it's past the window, my plant is wheat. Because even in Kansas, I had years that I planted wheat very late into the fall, and that thing makes through because the hardiness, the winter hardiness is really great in wheat. And if you go pull data, 85% of the wheat in Oklahoma is grazed every year up to January, February, and then they move the animals out and they grow a crop out of that same plant. They don't plant it again. So it's a double crop wheat in Oklahoma every year. So we are not exploring all those plants in Tennessee, and we do have 1.7 million of cattle in Tennessee, right? We do have better weather than Oklahoma and than Kansas. So we are not in Montana to feed hay for 143 days, man. I was in shock when I saw that number, because fescue itself should be able to help you for, 8 months, maybe 9 months of the year. So we should not be feeding hay here for 143 days. I won't tell you a number, but I think it can be much lower, much less than 143 days.
So I want to ask you, and this wasn't part of my planned questions, but like I said when we were starting, this is about my curiosity as much as anything. So, of course, and it's gaining traction in Missouri as well, but where people are growing milo or grain sorghum and letting it kill, and I'm sorry, hold on a second. The sorry, that was my 6-year-old. She just had to come and tell me apparently they stuffed one of the other kids in the dryer. I don't know what happened.
Oh man, what an afternoon.
So, I guess I was thinking about the Milo side, because I have a producer that's going to do it this year. I'm like, well, it's okay, because there's a lot to be, if we can get to that. And I'm curious what your thoughts, because my thoughts are we get so wet in the winter. It's not like Kansas, Missouri, where they can go put cows out on pasture and leave them.
Mhm.
And it's not like up in Canada and places, I guess South Dakota and all those would be cold enough where they would do the swathing thing where they'll mow down and then let them go and just pick it up like an unrolled bale. Anyway, I just wanted your feedback on that, because I definitely think there's value there as far as those grazing days. It's not necessarily grazing, but it is still not feeding hay days.
Yeah. The way I like to think about this, Jacob, is if I can put winter annuals on the top of my summer, the warm season plants, I will try to do so, right? It will allow you at least to graze for a few more days in the late fall, or start earlier in the spring. But you have a point here. If we are in a January that, it's wet and cold, and you don't want to trampling all of your pastures and create a mess. So it will be case by case. It will be depending on where you are and how much rain you got and how messy is the place. You may need to have a sacrifice area and say, okay, I'm going to mess up these 5 acres here, and I'm going to feed hay here while it's wet and everything is messy. But then as soon as the pastures dry out, you start to graze it early. One of the things that I feel like is a great step is when you can start to graze your cool season annuals earlier than fescue, right? If, for example, you can plant wheat in October, November, and then the wheat is great to be used in February. When your fescue is start to green up, you were kind of messing up with a plant that is an annual, and it's not your perennial, as you already mentioned earlier today. Every time we start to graze that fescue earlier, we delay the whole year, right? We will reduce the potential yield for the whole year. So if I can mess up in a place that is not in a perennial pasture, that's the place I'm going to do it. So if you have those annuals in place that you have annuals anyway, I'm not too concerned with compactation or messing up with the soil too much. I don't want you to do it in your perennials. So we can keep them for longer there.
Very good. And I know I kind of said we'd get to a drought question, and I'm going to try to keep this under an hour, so I got just a minute to ask you. What's your thoughts leading into this year? I think my area is 14 inches behind, I think, is the last map I saw last week. And I know you guys aren't much different than that. So across the entire state, we're definitely feeling it. Is it time to any of your borderline perennial fields, like, hey, let's
Yeah, no, you were 100% right. We are still right now, based on the last drought monitor that was released last week, we're still like 100% in drought. I'm expecting an update on this map tomorrow. They used to release a new one every Thursday, so it should be better because we got rain across the state. I've been talking with folks across the state, and I know that we had places that got more than 3 inches. Some places 3.8. So it should be a better map this week than it was. I think the best part of all of this is we do have El Nino in the forecast. There is a 60% chance of El Nino coming in. If it does happen, we will have a wetter and cooler summer. So we really need that at this point, right? But you're right, we already compromised the annual yield. Hay production is going to be shorter than it used to be because we won't get, there was no rain in March and April. So how can I get the same yield that I have every year if I didn't get that rain? Steps, going further is if you have animals that are not productive, cool it, call it off. If you have a cow that won't give you a calf later this year, she needs to be off. I know we all like to gather animals. Again, I'm a livestock producer myself. Prices are great right now. If there is a good time to get rid of them, is now. So you don't need to be feeding animals. They're not going to bring money to you. I'm sorry. Yeah, it hurts. It hurts me as well. But hay, if you were going to spend hay to feed, if you're going to feed animals with hay, spend money with hay, I don't want to feed a cow that's not going to give me a calf. So yeah, try to save your pastures. Try to have a sacrifice area. If you have access to any kind of, feed stuff that you can buy and bring it in, do it. Because even with that rain we got last week, if pastures start to green up and you keep overgrazing them because you don't have enough grass there, in 3 weeks from now we'll be talking about the same thing again, even if the rain is stable again, right? So get rid of the bad animals, the ones that are not going to bring you money. Try to feed them in a sacrifice area, and try to find any kind of feed stuff that can help you to make it through without overgrazing your pastures even more. And if that rain stays, man, go buy Sudex. Go buy sorghum. Go find a warm season annual that you like and that you grow for you, and you help us to make through the summer to make sure that fescue will be back after September when temperatures cool down again, and hopefully the rain will be in place.
Very good. Thank you for joining us around the fence post, Dr. Bruno Pedreira. Find him on Livestock, find him on Forage Nexus, and by all means sign up for the newsletter, or if you're on socials, coming out of the Tennessee Beef and Forage Center. There's lots of good information that come, and I of course share as many of those as I see really relevant and that I really can relate to, and I usually will find something to talk about off of them anyway. But thank you for joining us on Around the Fence Post, and we will see you next week.
As we wrap up today's episode, we hope something we shared helped you, challenged you, or gave you a new perspective. If even one moment stood out, please share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. That's how this community grows, one conversation at a time. You can find us as Around the Fence Post on Facebook and Wet Meadows Seed on Facebook and Instagram. We appreciate you being here. We'll see you next time, Around the Fence Post.